Shalom Tov Alechem. This video is geared towards those who are wondering how many types of Hebrew are there in general. What are my intentions in teaching this Hebrew instead of another type of Hebrew? And what can one learn from my videos? Firstly, there are several types of Hebrew. Hebrew was influenced by the surrounding nations. Now, when I say it was influenced by surrounding nations, we came in contact with other nations, and of course, due to their customs, whether it be deemed holy or not, we also retained those customs, and because those customs, they're let's say adjectives and ways of speech were attached to those customs, we also retained, and it blended in within our language. Hebrew differed throughout each time period. Now, you should know by now that the Tanakh, or what people call the Bible, was not written all together at once. Okay, so each book has its own time period. Therefore, it will reflect within the manner of speech. Okay, so me being within the 21st century, I would not speak as though I was in the 15th century. Okay, so within a language develops. So it reflects the time period. Also, the same nuances would not be reflected within my time period from those who were living 200 years ago. So that is how it was within the Tanakh, okay? Now there's archaic Hebrew. Now this terminology differs from person to person, from book to book, from grammarian to grammarian, and linguist to linguist, okay? But archaic, when I say archaic Hebrew, it is the oldest known Hebrew. Now this is before, this is after the what one would call the pictorial Hebrew, okay? So this is not the Hebrew that you see majority of videos on, okay? This is the Canaanite, once we took over the Canaanite text or Canaanite script. That's the archaic Hebrew, okay? Not the one before that. That one would call that prehistoric. I know every book is different and they label these things differently, okay? So again, I say just have an open mind when it comes to the name. Now, standard biblical Hebrew, one would say that is what the Tanakh is mostly written, okay? So again, this is by time period. Transitional biblical Hebrew is from one period into the next. This is closer to the latter half of the Tanakh, okay? And no, not saying that and I should say the Bible, because the Bible is more it's written differently than how the Tanakh is. Okay, Tanakh is broken up by it's categorized differently. Okay, then there's late biblical Hebrew, and that's transitioning into what people call the Mishnaic Hebrew. Mishnaic Hebrew flows right into Talmudic Hebrew. Okay, once the late biblical Hebrew started to appear, the language started to decline, and then Aramaic, which gave way to Aramaic. Okay, Mishnaic Hebrew, it's like Talmudic / rabbinical. Okay, and for those who don't know what Talmudic Hebrew is, it's Hebrew just found in the Talmud. Okay, so it is indeed Hebrew, but it's used within a Talmudic context. Okay, Mishnaic Hebrew, there is a early period, and then there is the transition that it goes within the Talmud. Okay. Also, for Hebrew, there would be a different dialects, much like how Arabic has many different dialects influenced by the time and tribe and place. Okay, so for those who do know a little Arabic, you should know that there is a standard Arabic, and then there are this Arabic that is flows into the countries. Okay, meaning that every country has their own dialect, and within that country, a tribe might have their own dialect, and then a person, meaning a community, will have their own dialect as well. Okay, so it's complicated, and that's how Hebrew is. Now, there is Northern Hebrew, just like how they have the northern tribes. Okay, and this might be influenced by whomever's at the top or whomever's at the bottom. Okay, remember we were in contact with the Egyptians. We were in contact with the Midianites, the Hittites, the Hivites. We have so many people around us. It did influence Hebrew. Okay, Hebrew was not just closed off. It was influenced. And remember, we went into captivity how many times? So we picked up on a lot of things. Okay, so once you start going through the Tanakh, you'll start to understand. You'll start to see it. You'll start to see what is and what wouldn't be Hebrew. Hebrew has roots. Some of those roots have been lost, okay? But usually you can pick up on a Hebrew word because of its root. With other words, they don't have a Hebrew root. So you'll know that, well, okay, so this is Akkadian, or this might be Egyptian. So you'll know through experience. Okay, so Hebrew also has a poetic form. Okay, the Psalms, Tehillim, yes, that has its own type of poetic form. Same thing with Mishle. Okay, Proverbs, same thing there. The books generally do not have one complete uniformity, but you can section off them. Late Biblical Hebrew / Aramaic. When you go into Daniel and you go into Ezra, you'll see that this Hebrew is the most different. Okay, the words have changed, the grammar has changed a bit, and I wish to teach you that as well, but that's not gonna come for a long time. Okay, so I do have books on Aramaic. I do have books on each time period as well, but these I can't teach it until you guys are grounded, rooted firmly. Okay. So, why am I teaching this type of Hebrew? Now, I'm teaching you this Hebrew for a couple of reasons, okay? Now, I'm not saying that this is the only Hebrew out there and this is the way you should do it, and no, okay? Bear in mind, again, this is the most thought out and thorough type of Hebrew. Okay, there's been a lot of research done on this type. Ancient Hebrew, not so much. Okay, and there are a lot of people on, YouTube who are more equipped to teach you that type. I've done and I know modern biblical Hebrew to a large extent. Now, rabbinical Hebrew, not so much because it's past the Tanakh. Okay, this is the transition where the Europeans started to take over. Okay, and it flows straight into medieval Hebrew, and then from medieval Hebrew, it flows straight into modern Hebrew. Okay, so modern Hebrew, yes, I know that, and classical Hebrew, yes. Ancient Hebrew to an extent because of the roots, okay, but for me to break down everything into ancient Hebrew because there's not that much information on it, I am not privy to share that with you, okay? So, the Masoretic signs tend to be the most cohesive, and because of that, and because it follows a pattern, a known grammatical pattern, I deem it better for me to teach it to you, and you guys can pick up from there and teach your children or whomever. There is a sense of uniformity because of the Masoretes writing the vowels. One tends to understand the text a little better. Okay, it's quicker. If the vowels weren't there, it would take even longer to learn because you will have to figure out the inflections yourself. And if you're a beginner, that's even worse. Okay, for those who are at an intermediate or advanced stage, it's easier because you already passed through the foundations. Okay, as I stated before, if you have a strong foundation, you're able to build a house. If you have a weaker foundation, it can topple very quick. Okay, and you'll have to start all over again. So why am I not teaching you ancient Hebrew? Okay, so ancient Hebrew is usually used for reference. I mean, I use it for reference. Okay, and this is not the pictorial Hebrew. There are many names that have been allotted to, or have been attached to each of these time periods. So it might be different for you, but the pictorial Hebrew, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when we started to use the Canaanite script. Okay, that I think most people call ancient Hebrew. Before that, when you saw pictures were used as each consonant. That's not the Hebrew I'm talking about. Okay, but you can trace the grammar points in certain books to ancient Hebrew, of course. As I said, I have a few books on the Canaanite text, but again, those are geared towards intermediate and advanced students because the grammar, if you don't understand the grammar, and if you don't understand the grammatical aspects, you can tend to become lost quickly. Okay, so that's why I don't teach it. And there's a lot that is unknown. Okay, there are a lot of unknown aspects to ancient Hebrew, and I wish I had all the money in the world to buy all of these things, but it's not that easy to do. Two, I am not in that position so to do. Okay, a lot of our texts are hidden. A lot of our texts are within museums. So I mean, I don't have that clearance to go and just pick up and read these things. So what is my objective in doing this video? I have several. Okay. And one of them is to equip you with an extensive working grammar. Okay. And what I mean by working, it's it's one thing to use Hebrew as a reference, as you know, when you go into the Bible and you try figuring out, okay, so what does this actually mean? You come up on a word and you want to know what it means in Hebrew, and you go into a lexicon or a concordance, or you go into a dictionary and you pull up the word and you find out what it means. Great. And you use that as a vocabulary word. Awesome. However, for me, I'm trying to take it a step, well, several steps further. I'd like you to use it in your daily lives. Okay, so this as a living, breathing language. Okay, so what the Jews have done was you take biblical classical Hebrew, Hebrew of the Tanakh. This is stemming from ancient all the way to late, and take that Hebrew and make it their own. For me, it's using the whole Tanakh and remembering we are these people. We are the descendants of these people, okay? And use that period, okay? So what I do on a daily basis, okay, in my life, I use modern Hebrew vocabulary words, okay? So if I'm gonna say the bus or automobile or autobus or any other modern word, I would use that, but just still have my Semitic syntax, still have my Semitic grammar, but just use the modern terminology. Okay, and this is not for everything, it's just for whatever is modern, because we didn't have too many mechanical things within that time period. Okay, so that's one. Two, reading, writing, and speaking Hebrew. Speaking, it might take you a longer time, it may not, because remember, you're reading and you're writing at first, and usually, I shouldn't even say usually, all the time, okay, one speaks first before he writes and before he reads. That is the norm. You sound words out. So speaking might take you a little longer to do, but I would like you guys to start reading on your own, okay, writing on your own. Let's see. Okay, so to understand scripture with a Hebrew mindset, and then to interpret the scriptures yourself. This way, you don't need to hinge upon someone's interpretation of it. You can go into the Tanakh yourself, and you can, read it. You have the foundation, you have the basic context, the basic concept of Hebrew. So you do not need to rely heavily. I mean, of course, this is why you have teachers and you have elders who know more. So of course you can go to them, but you have a working knowledge of the scriptures, of the vocabulary, of the roots. Okay? And going back to understanding scripture with a Hebrew mindset, again, I have to say once more, modern Hebrew differs greatly, okay? No matter how many people say that it's the same thing, it's not. Modern Hebrew differs greatly in vocabulary and in syntax, mostly in syntax, okay? Because it has taken on a European mindset. So the way how we thought, our forefathers thought, definitely isn't the same how the Israelis think. Okay, that's why the language has taken on such a different mood. Okay, it's not the same. So for me, the best thing that you guys could do is to read it, and when you read it, you understand how we or what we went through, how we thought, because it's pretty much the same now. Hopefully, it's changing, okay, and I mean it for the best, not to take on the same wicked ways or the wickedness that our forefathers have done, but I'm speaking in a linguistic as well as a cultural way, okay? Linguistic and cultural. And the best way of me sharing this is with, let me see. So, if Hebrew has a root, and this root here, it's His, Beth, and Resh, right? Now, this root makes up a word, or makes up many words. It can be a verb, it can be a noun, it can be an adjective, an adverb, it can be used in different ways. Now, this in late biblical Hebrew, was known to be as a friend, haver, the word. So, ha-ver, haver, okay, accent is here. So it's not haver, but haver, right? So let's take that out. So from this root here, we have haver. In biblical Hebrew, and this is, let's say, central time, okay, meaning the middle time, not late time, not early time, central. And I should say early biblical Hebrew as well. The word for friend or associate, like this, haver, that's the meaning, was re'ah. This. Now this, if I look at it, I might think it's bad. Ra. But again, within context, you'll know. So going back here, so I have Hith, Beth, Resh, Haver. From this root, you can make another, if my pen would work. Okay, finally. Another word will be mehaber. Mehaber. Okay, so mehaber. Oi. Oily. Okay. So mehaber. Mehaber. Okay. So from this root, you can make other words. Now, this in modern Hebrew would be author. Okay. So this is how they've come up with other words that are in modern Hebrew. Okay. For those who still think that this Hebrew is Yiddish, this is how they come up with words, which is how we came up with words. So, what's going on here? Okay. So I will try giving you a now classical approach to this. So you have the word, well, you have the root. You have samech, pe, and resh. From this, one can have other words. So you have sofer, and this is a scribe. Then you might have sefer. This is book or like parchment, any type of scroll. Next, you have mispar. This is number. So you understand now that roots, through the root, you're able to obtain other words. This is how modern Hebrew is as well. So, however, it's because of the European mindset, the syntax have changed. This is why I use the vocabulary, but the syntax, meaning the structure of Hebrew, has changed drastically. Okay, so let's move on here. So everything that you're learning is privy to scrutiny and conjecture. Okay, so each Hebrew, each phase of Hebrew, you will always learn something new. You can always dispute something if you've heard differently. Okay, nothing is grounded as this is it exactly, but it still has to come within the confines of grammar. Okay, one cannot just make up stuff. Okay, you just can't do it. It still has to be confined to, there's rules. There are rules in everything. If you go beyond those rules, then people start to doubt the validity of what you're saying. Now, it can happen where it's actually not confined to certain grammatical rules, just like every language. However, the majority of a language has a structure or a pattern. And this, again, I'm alluding to certain types of Hebrew that breaks that completely. However, this is not to lambast those who still think, that this Hebrew is it. But every language has their own set of rules, okay? And once you break the pattern of those rules within that language, it causes problems, okay? So Hebrew has gone through many phases, morphologically and phonologically, okay? So when I mean morphologically, I mean it has morphed, okay? The way one speaks, the accents, the vowels, and phonologically, meaning the, again, accents, the sounds of Hebrew has changed. Okay, just a quick example, because this is run on longer than I wanted, but just a quick example, if I can get it. Okay, so and if this thing can work, okay, great. So melech, and this is used often. This is used often. Okay, so let's see if this can work. Melech. This means king in Hebrew. Now, supposedly, okay, and I'm going by what I've learned, okay, and what has been researched so far. In ancient Hebrew, this would have been melch instead of melech, and this is only for Seligate words. We'll go over this in, grammar. So this would have been, if this would work. Sorry guys, this is a very fickle program and it annoys me. But bear with me. So this would have been this way, melch. So notice something different than here. You have two shuas, and that usually doesn't happen. Two sounding shuas, so shua na. This usually doesn't happen. This is how majority of the Seligate nouns or words would have been. So there's a pattern with ancient Hebrew as well. This is morphed into this. And this was what we mean by morphologically, okay? Now, the double-edged sword in this would be the Masoretic vowels do not reflect at all, okay, the chronological formation of Hebrew. And what I mean by that, remember, Hebrew goes by a time period. This unifies, the Masoretic vowels unify the time period. Okay, so it flattens out. So the time period is like this. What happens with these vowels? It flattens everything out because everything is the same. It doesn't change within the time. So again, remember I said that I would not be speaking as though I was in the 12th century. The syntax would have changed a bit. The verbiage would have changed. The vocabulary, how it's used, would have changed a little. Still sticking within the confines of the people. Okay, so those who still argue that modern Hebrew and biblical Hebrew are the same, the syntax has changed too drastically. Okay, yes, it's been a long time, but the people have changed as well. So that is why I'm saying that. So the vowels have been flattened out. It does not represent the accents, the nuances in a language, which would have been beautiful. However, that hasn't happened. And I don't know who's able to do that. So the way Ezra speaks would have been different than how Moshe spoke. Okay? That's how it is in any language. We won't speak the same. Okay? Time changes, incidents happen, and because of those incidents, it shapes the language. It shapes the people, which shape the language, I should say. Okay? And the other side of that sword or coin would be that we have vowels. Because if we didn't have any of these vowels, we wouldn't know or we wouldn't understand how to pronounce the words. Okay? Shalom, shalom.